All right, well, welcome back to the Herbalist Hour. Today I'm joined by Patricia Carizzi Howell, Kat Meyer, and Emily Ruff, and they just created a new course that's coming out somewhat soonish. It's called Crafting Your Herbal Practice, and I'm excited to learn all about that. And they're going to be answering some questions, not just about the course itself, but just super helpful questions for clinical herbalists in general.
Welcome to the Herbalist Hour. This is where community gather, merging the power of people and the flowers, the sweet and the bitter to the salty, the sour. Umami, it's time for the Herbalist Hour.
Why don't we kick things off with some brief introductions? And Patricia, why don't we start with you?
Sure. Happy to be here, Mason, and thanks for all the work you're doing with Herb Rally. It's really inspiring. I'm in the Southern Appalachians in North Georgia. I have an herb school here, Batana Logos School for Herbal Studies. Been here for about 30 years, doing a lot of work with teaching people about plants of this region, and also mentoring, which is, I closed my clinical practice in 2018, and since then have really just spent a lot of my time working with student practitioners who are interested in taking all that they've learned and starting to use it to help people and their families and their communities. So I find that work really inspiring. And so when Kat and Emily and I sort of started talking about how we could use that, recognition of that need, I was really excited to collaborate with them. And I'm excited about our course.
Love it. How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I want to echo Patricia's deep gratitude for all of your work, Mason, before we begin to talk about us, just what you're doing, who you're interviewing. I am learning so much about our community, especially West Coast herbalists. I just love getting all the different terrains, and you're just so fun and just really enjoyable. So I wasn't prompted to say this, but this is
I'll pay you later.
Gift on Mason. So become a member. I mean, this is such a resource, your schoolhouse and all of that. So
thank you so much, Kat.
Yeah, from the heart, from the heart. So yeah, I'm coming to you all from Charlottesville, Virginia. And I have a school, Sacred Plant Traditions. I've had here 20 years. Can't believe we've been here that long. And so it's a botanical sanctuary. It's a downtown botanical sanctuary. All three of us are deeply involved with United Plant Savers, and that's near and dear to our heart. And so this is a sample or a template of an urban sanctuary, and that's really tied into a lot of my classes. I used to run a clinical program, but I'm evolving into other classes now, and hence the creation of the class we'll be talking about. But yeah, I have, I'm really enjoying traveling and teaching now. And my book, Energetic Herbalism, has been sort of a shift into a new direction. So.
Right on. How about you, Emily?
Hey, like Kat and Patricia said, it's just an honor to be included in the amazing other herbalists that have preceded us on your show here, and just an humble honor of all the ways you support schools and conferences and budding herbalists around the country with all the resources you and Amanda provide. My name's Emily Ruff. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm tuning in today from unceded Abenaki territory known as Central Vermont, from a little tiny spot on top of a mountain known as Sage Mountain, which was Rosemary Gladstar's home and teaching center for 30 years. I moved here from a very hyper-urban school environment about 5 years ago down in Central Florida in Orlando area to continue Rosemary's legacy of conservation and education and healing. And with the Florida School of Holistic Living and through other ventures, I've been teaching herbalism for about 25 years. And I'm really excited to be collaborating with some of my favorite teachers and friends, Kat and Patricia, to find ways to continue supporting the herbal community now more than ever. I feel like we all need an herbalist in every home and a community herbalist in every community to foster and support the health of our communities. So humble honor to be here with all of you.
Mhm.
Thanks for the intros. And of course, thanks for the kudos. We've been doing a segment on the Herbalist Hour, some of the episodes called Giving Flowers, where we basically, I ask the guests to give flowers to different people that help them along their herbalist journey or just in life in general. And I feel like I got a lot of flowers right there. So I really appreciate that. That was really sweet and gave me goosebumps and all of these tingles and nice feels. So thank you so much. We're going to kick things off with a question provided by Patricia Caritzi Howell. She asks one of the instructors, what do you think is the stumbling block that keeps folks who have studied herbs extensively from actually starting to practice? So Emily, why don't we start that off with you this time?
Sure, absolutely. That's a great question, Patricia, and one that I hear a lot from my own students and, fluttering around at conferences and just through the community. And I think what my own experience was, and what I know a lot of my peers' experience has been, is that there is not a cookie cutter, one size fits all framework for transitioning from an herbal student to an herbal practitioner in a community. And so it really requires both a solid knowledge of herbalism and also a solid foundation of entrepreneurialism, which is not by nature what a lot of us sort of have blossomed into. Where our fingernails are dirty from digging in the garden and our, apothecaries are rich with the medicines we've made, and our head is full of knowledge of the phytoconstituents and the anatomy and physiology. But when it comes to packaging that all together and creating a right livelihood with it, there is not really like a framework or a foundation. It requires a lot of sort of creativity if we don't have those backgrounds in business and legal. And it's also very unique to each community that we work within. So I think that creates a bit of a struggle for a lot of folks, because it's not like a path is necessarily clearly laid out before us. It's a path that we are often pioneering and embarking on ourselves. And that's a big part of why Kat and Patricia and I are collaborating to try to create some of those resources and framework to support and empower folks.
Anything you want to add, Kat?
Yeah, I just always love listening to Emily. But I do want to say the collaboration has just been such a mentorship for me as well. And as we're moving forward and unfolding in the curriculum design and inspiration, and how we're really gathering all of our all of our provisions of all the details, it has an organic life of its own, and it's almost like that herbal practice. It is really crafting itself to what are the needs. So I just want to say it's alive, and I'm just learning so much from Emily and Patricia. So, I kind of liken herbal practice to certain crowds. I say this to, Terence McKenna, I consider a teacher of mine. I took many classes from him, and he said, if you're not holding that heroic dose and you're not frightened, then you're not in the right space. And so I kind of feel the same thing with herbal practice. If you're not slightly terrified, then you're not in the right space, because you're about to step into someone's sacred life. They're trusting you. You're entering this arena that's very, very personal, intimate, and serious. And so the tools, one of the things that we are looking at is, what is holding students back? What is the hesitation? And as Emily said, we have all the plants and the apothecary and, maybe our body systems, we know inside or out, or we're just learning. But then there's the other medicine tools in the bag. Holding space, how to answer certain questions, what to do if you get into trouble, or, all these vital tools that just really aren't addressed in the majority of programs, and there just isn't time. So really kind of upping the ante with clinical skills and really taking it the step of the seriousness. And, I really applaud many students for having that hesitation, because they know, what am I going to do if this happens? Or how do I secure, is it an LLC, S Corp, different things of that nature? Really important. They're as important as our formulations in a way, how to protect ourselves. So, yeah, so I think that a lot of the classes and topics we're going to be addressing are building that confidence of the security and the safety.
Trisha?
Agree with everything. And Kat said something that I want to just sort of expand on a little, which is the idea of right livelihood. A lot of the times when I'm mentoring students or people who are just starting their practices, there's this sort of underlying, like, I don't know, guilt about charging for their services or charging for the herbs that maybe they wildcrafted or something. And one of the things that, I mean, that's definitely a stage I went through in my clinical development. And one of the things I think we're going to try to help the people who are in the program do is understand that without a firm foundation for yourself, where you have what you need to pay your rent, to pay your bills, to keep your internet on, it's really difficult to be a steady source of support for your clients. And so we'll be talking a lot about exploring those feelings, those doubts about, what is okay to charge for. And I have seen a lot of practitioners. Actually, what often happens is people start practicing and they get overwhelmed by the demand, because there is a big demand out there for, competent, supportive herbal practice. And then they start dropping balls. They forget to call people back. They mix a formula wrong. They get hit with a big tax bill that they didn't expect. And so I think that what the three of us are really trying to do is pool together all the places that we've stumbled or we've struggled and offer some guidelines so that it is something that nourishes you as an herbalist as well as the people you're working with. Because it's, with any healthcare profession, it's really easy to give because there's so much need. But what's also needed is a way to make sure that you are grounded, that you keep your connection with the plants. I would say that's probably for all of us on this, the four of us here, it can become where we're spending a lot of time on the computer and we're starting to think, wait a minute, this isn't why I became an herbalist, because I really want to be with plants. I want to pick them. I want to taste them. I want to share them. So when I think of right livelihood, I think of guidelines for making sure that you can do both things. You can keep a business running, be an entrepreneur, as Emily said, but also be nourished by the work that you do. So that's another piece I think we're all really committed to.
Yeah, this is such an important thing to talk about. I'm not a clinical herbalist, but I feel like I still kind of struggle with the same thing, where it's like us in the herbal community have such this interesting relationship with money and everything, and we want to give everything away for free. But it's super important to have a right livelihood, as you said, Patricia. And we just released a video with Krista Sinadinas. Basically, the theme was know your worth. She says we don't, the plumber knows his worth or his or her worth, and they're not like negotiating and and all that. And it's like herbalists, we need to kind of learn to know our worth and what to charge our clients and whatnot. So super important message. How important is mentoring in the early stage process? Why don't we start with you, Patricia?
Well, as a passionate mentor, I would say it's critical. For me, I was very fortunate to have my good friend now and collaborator, Althea Northridge Orr in Chicago, as my first clinical mentor, who reviewed my cases, gave me advice, made sure that I didn't do anything too crazy, and also just supported me with, I think a lot of what happens in mentoring is not so much that someone's reviewing your formulas or, although that's a significant part, or helping you come up with protocols, but also, I'm just remembering one time early in my practice where I was asking someone about that she told me she had broken both her feet and both her legs at one point in her life, and that she had a long recovery, and it was really. And I was like, oh my God, what happened? And basically she had been being molested by someone in her family, and she finally just tried to escape by jumping out a window. And I was so unprepared for that answer that I didn't know what to do or say or how to hold space for her and for myself because I felt, shocked. And I don't think I handled it well. I just kind of went, oh, okay. So what about your bowel movements? It's like I didn't really know how to navigate that territory. And so that's one of the skill sets that we're going to be talking about is how to handle those uncomfortable conversations in a way that's respectful of boundaries, yours and the person you're with, and also, creating that really safe space for those conversations to happen. And it's definitely not anything I've read about in the NERV book. So it's something you learn through practice and through being authentic with the people you're working with.
How about you, Emily?
Yeah, I will, echo and just support everything that Patricia just shared. I think that even 20 years into a practice, having the support of a mentor is still something that really helps me identify my blind spots, helps me develop sort of creative strategies when a formulation that seems really solid and down pat and should be working isn't working, being able to reflect off of someone and soundboard and share those ideas. And so I think especially those of us that are early on our practice journey, like being able to have both the affirmations that a mentor can provide that we're on the right track to help us build and establish our confidence, as well as keep steering us in appropriate directions. I talk a lot to students about the Hippocratic Oath and that, first pledge of do no harm. And I think that really for me was what a mentor provided in my early years of practice, is ensuring that I was both in the formulas that I was choosing, as well as in the interpersonal interactions that I was having, was not, causing more harm just by the way that I may be uninformed on a topic or uncomfortable, as Patricia said, with a topic, which is, something that on and on is happening for a lot of my students. And so, as well as what Patricia said, not doing harm to ourselves, knowing how to care for ourselves and tend to ourselves and have appropriate professional boundaries and have tools and strategies and practices that we can use after those difficult sessions to ensure that we are, I talk about with my students sometimes herbalism isn't something that we can just clock out of generally. And hopefully we're not. Like, we should be really compassionate, open-hearted beings that are reflecting that generosity of the plants and receiving our clients in that way. So hopefully we're caring about our clients, but we also have to know when and where and how to put that down and to ensure that we are, maintaining our own strength and resilience through that process. So I think mentors are invaluable for supporting, especially folks early on their path in those things.
Thank you. How about you, Kat?
Yeah, I really went for many, many years without a mentor. And that was actually the impetus to start First School with Teresa Boardwine, Dreamtime Center. And I really struggled. I had a lot of questions. I made a lot of mistakes. I read a lot of books. I spent a lot of time in the woods, but there just really wasn't a mentor for me. And I felt the paucity, and I felt it took a long, long time, I think, to arrive at certain realizations and protocols, whatever that is. And so I just, when I finally had a good practice, I thought that we really need to shift this up. And I didn't feel at that time that there were in my area that many people to mentor. So we started the school, and I really feel education in many ways is that beginning platform. And then moving into a 3-year clinical program, the more advanced years in some ways was a collective mentorship. And we held each other going through as a community. And in some ways that's, what this year that we're looking at, this training, and it's also, to say here, this is what a mentor can feel like. And it's not as though we're putting ourselves out as here, we want to be your mentors, but this is what you want to feel. This is the support. This is the experience. And it's collective, it's not just one of us. And herbalism, there's so many flavors and tastes and formulas. And, we're definitely not saying this is the way. We're not trying to standardize. We're giving our personal examples. We're hopefully bringing humor into what not to do, because we, early on, we were just out there without, lots of guidance. So it's so vital. It's really important. And I've been mentoring students as well now. And there are so many that have just been online. Mm-hmm. And, no judgment. It's what do we do? Where are we going? How are we going to go forward? This is a virtual class, this is online. But we're hoping that the gardens have flourished and the medicine a lot has happened by the time you get to this place. So I think there's a whole new world coming forward. And how do we mentor? How do we guide students to have that deep relationship? It's relations. And how do we have relations, whether it's with a teacher or a guide or a classroom? I mean, we all know what happens at the end of 9 months. I joke and I said, we could call our schools the school of transformation, but we don't want to be new agers. We're herbalists, right? But after an herbal course, lives are changed, and they just thought, oh, I'm just coming in to learn how to tend to my family. And it is profound. And so where do you go from there? So just, the leadership, the mentorship is really invaluable, and it can come in a lot of different forms.
Yeah, I want to say I read on your website, between the three of you, there's 70 years of experience. So, the students would have a lot to gain there. Something that came up for me, and maybe we could talk about this later on in the episode when we talk more about the nuts and bolts of the course itself. But I guess, Kat, maybe if you want to continue on, and again, we could save this for later, but what's the difference between, say, a mentorship and just, say, like attending a class or a course where you have like a teacher teaching herbalism and whatnot? Is there a difference? Or do you have any answer to that? Or would you like to just answer that later on when we talk about the course itself?
We're here now. And
yeah, sure.
So when I talk about my clinical, and I don't want to make it about that curriculum, but we're all talking about education. This is whether anybody even looks at our class. This is for the whole community. My small clinic classes is pretty individual. And they, I do make myself available for the one-on-one. And also, it's in that community that when my students watch another student do an intake, they're like, wow, I never would have thought to have asked that. Mm-hmm. Or, wow, I won't ask it that way. So there's this constant reflection as we're doing this in front, and I have a certain way that I hold it, and it's not open to all these questions. It's, just between that student herbalist. So it's exponential in some ways. I have really found I can get up there and I can do the intake, but when they see their fellow students struggling with certain issues or different places, there's this collective learning of, what would I have said? Oh my God, they were so brilliant. I would have been so nervous at that point. So for me, that form brought in so many other teachings than I could have one-on-one. They were teaching each other and sharing in that way. So there's so many different models, but we're always talking, but there's nothing like getting somebody in need, not just a volunteer as a cousin, but somebody really in a space, and how do we show up for them? That, I don't know, that answers the question, but both are really helpful. And I've mentored folks that don't have that ability, don't have a class. And, I just think the in-person group learning is huge because of what happens in between the spaces, things I don't even know about. Halfway through, I'll realize that in between with the students, things are going on, things are being shared, and it's just making that whole experience that much more richer and more multidimensional than I could even attempt.
For sure. Did either of you two have something to add to that, or do you want to go to the next question?
I'm good with what Kat said.
Cool.
I like that you know, that whole idea, and I'll just say one thing now that I said I wasn't going to say anything. That, you know, right now I'm like halfway through a 10-month herbal program that I'm teaching for the last time, my foundations program. And there's you know, after like the initial couple of times the group is together, we get to a point where I sort of feel like I'm interrupting the process to teach the class, because there's so much wisdom in the room. You know, everybody has a little piece that they're like sharing with each other. And you know, sometimes I feel a little like I shouldn't be teaching this. We should sit in a circle and everyone should be contributing it. But I think the difference between that and something like a mentorship is that it can be very personalized. You know, it can be very specific for where the person is in the moment. And that's one of the things we've been really hammering out as we put the curriculum together, is how to do something online and have it meet the needs of each of the students. So we're limiting the class size. We've got some plans for doing smaller mentoring groups where, you know, small groups of students will work personally with one of us, you know, for an extended period of time. And, you know, there's, you know, we've all referenced this, there's like no formula. You know, some people already have a medical background and now they're adding herbs. Some people have a growing background and now they want to help with herbs. So it's like, I mean, that's one of the things I think that's so remarkable, especially about how herbalism occurs here in the United States, where we don't have a standardized measure for who's an herbalist. And so the richness and the expanse of what people bring to their herbal practice is something that we're really committed to not force anyone to wear a certain outfit to do this work, but to, you know, be authentically whoever they are as an herbal practitioner. And I think that's what a mentor can really do for you.
Love it. Emily, do you feel compelled to respond too?
Given the microphone, always. I think just, you know, echoing and supporting everything that Kat and Patricia just said, and just that when I think about taking a class, even a foundations class or a preclinical class, I think a lot about like what I'm harvesting and putting into my like foraging basket. And then through the process of sitting in consultation with a client, I'm then like weaving those teachings into something that I'm handing over to the client and sharing with them. And the mentorship is sort of then like a reflection on what is this craft that I've just created from all of these amazing bits of wisdom that I've gleaned from the classes and have woven together in this very personalized thing that I'm sharing with my client. And so I think that, you know, they work hand in hand. We have to have that education and that experience to have a full basket of tools to share with our client. But then, you know, the refining process, the alchemizing, the polishing, I think comes through the mentorship.
Herbalists are so brilliant and poetic. I love it. Thank you all for your answers. We're going to start with Patricia on this question. Do herbalists really need to be in business, in quotes, or can they just let it all flow organically?
Oh, I made that question, didn't I?
You sure did. You made the first like 7 or 8.
Well, I had a double shot of espresso before I sent you that email, just in full disclosure.
Fair enough.
You know, I would contrast what I think now with what happened to me, which was, you know, I just sort of stumbled into it. You know, I started with people I knew, you know, who knew I knew something about herbs. Then, you know, I think a transition occurred when people I didn't know started contacting me. And that was when I really had to scramble to figure out what I was doing. Because before that, it was like, yeah, come over to my house. We'll talk. I'll make some tea. You know, I have some questions for you. but then when people I didn't know started asking me for help, and then they referred somebody else in their family, that's when I really realized, like, I don't really have what I need to do this in a way that's ethical, and also that I'm available for them. When they need something on the weekend, or they run out of a formula, do I still have the herbs? All of those little logistical considerations, and I dropped a lot of balls, and I also, made a lot of mistakes with what I was doing. And so I think that now we're in a very different place, how herbalism is thought of in the United States. It was very much, there were like 2 herb schools in the 80s. So it was very, very different. So now I think that when somebody says they're an herbalist, automatically people have certain expectations of them. And I really encourage people to take themselves seriously, so that when their practice does start to roll, that they have everything they need to do it, and they're not scrambling to catch up. So I'm very business oriented in my work. I believe that, knowing about sales tax, knowing about wholesale accounts, having a bookkeeping system, having a system for your apothecary, that doing all of that behind the scenes work allows you to be fully present when you're with somebody and talking to them about their health issues. And I think without that, it does contribute to, the realistic, like, humbleness of, like, do I know enough to really help this person? But then also can make you feel like you're never ready, and you're always trying to catch up. So I think you can do it both ways. I think one is much more anxiety producing, and the other one is a lot more demanding on your time. So
I've never heard it quite put like that. If you take care of all the not so sexy aspects, as you say on your website, the taxes and the accounting and whatnot, you're able to actually be much more present with your client when you're with them, because you're not worried about it in the background and whatnot. So very well said, Patricia. How about you, Kat? Any input on that?
Yeah, I've been practicing for 40 years. And so in the beginning, I was absolutely thrilled when someone would come seeking herbal help. And it's funny because, I started, again, I didn't have a school. I apprenticed to the plants, really. I didn't really have that many teachers. And I became a physician assistant, but to live in the rural area to study the plants, it was at a time when massage was not licensed. So I went and got the George Downey hand-drawn massage book. I, practiced massage. And so I would travel to really wealthy Virginians' home in the morning and give massage, and then come study plants. And so I did that for about 7 years, studying the plants, growing the plants, making the medicine. And I say this to Mark Blumenthal, but I refer to myself as an herbalist when my community, when they said, oh, go to the herbalist, because I didn't know, I didn't know at what point are you an herbalist. And so it's a very different time. It was a very different environment. And I didn't have a lot of numbers. I didn't have QuickBooks. I had my handwritten, expenses and income. And so I know that you can have a practice without a business, because we have Tommy Bass, and we have a lot of our traditional healers that, don't have that. And I very much support folks that feel safe. That's how they roll. That's organic for them. And that's beautiful, and there's a real freedom there. For me, when I really started coming into form, if you will, in the business sense, was with the school, because now I have a clinic where students are seeing people. I mean, my relationship with my clients was one-on-one, and now it's extending beyond. And so that whole issue of liability and safety and practice and kind of, all right, let's get some clarity here and much better definition. So the definition, it's just as Patricia's saying, there's a real safety there. It's like whether GMP is going to come into our apothecary or not, we want to really keep the area clear. We want to make sure this scutellaria is scutellaria and this herb is this herb. And so just as we might snazz up our gardens with biodynamic, higher vibration, cosmic forces, it's the same thing in some ways of other business practices. You're really streamlining, you're bringing in a different energetic. And yes, as Patricia says, it can make you safer, it can be clearer. It is also a very different environment than 40 years ago in rural Appalachia, out of my cabin, hauling water. So it's a different political environment. And because herbs are now really in a different place, for the profession in some ways, it's who are we? And how are we representing? And that consistency. I remember Buhner was talking about how to set up a space. And he said, you really don't want things that'll charge. And I had a lot of Mennonite clients because that's who taught me herbalism. They did not go to the doctor. And so my sister said, God, it looks like all these yoni baskets. You got all this goddess stuff all around your house. And it was just baskets we were making. And I looked at the environment and I thought, oh, everybody is coming here. Christians are coming, Mennonites, Buddhists. How do I create a professional, neutral, and then some people feel comfortable with business? So I'm kind of getting off that business model. But we talk about this. How do you create a space? You want it yours. You want it your home. But what is safety? Safety comes in many, many forms to many different denominations. So, learning that way. So that's what's so beautiful about herbalism is there is no standardization. There is not that licensure. And also it's good practices. We have our daily meditation, we have our daily habits. And I want Emily to speak to this, but we spend, the first part of the course on self-care. Like this isn't, you cannot go out until, how are you? Do you have your system supported? And so I think always exist. And I totally dig what we're coming to, bringing this consciousness to practice and business and the questions. You can look at LLC S Corp and say, wow, I don't want that, but you've checked them off. You're not naive. You're not just assuming it's all good. You've done due diligence and you're arriving with, yeah, I love my simple practice. So
much good stuff there. And that's a nice segue to you, Emily.
Yeah, I think what both Patricia and Kat's reflections remind me of, I'm not sure I can add much novel to their sharing, but I think what you just said, Kat, I really want to riff on that for a second, because I feel like the evaluation of establishing a business versus just letting it flow organically is really about refining and crystallizing our intention. And being really clear when we approach a client and when we approach our community, and both knowing what we don't want to do as well as knowing what we do want to do versus just sort of stumbling forth into it and saying, okay, it's going to be whatever it is. I think that the more clear we are with our intention, both what we are engaging and what we're deciding not to, really allows us to bring our fullest authenticity and integrity to our clients. And the other thing I just keep thinking about is this analogy of a business providing the banks of a river, and that we can really flow more fiercely and fully and powerfully if we have really solid banks. And so as someone who, whether it's my astrological chart or my upbringing or all the things in between, is not a business-minded person by nature, I have found that structure to really allow me to flow much more powerfully when I have those banks erected around me and that sort of foundation underneath me. and lets me meet my clients with, much more integrity and much more clarity. And so again, it's also going to look different for every community and every person, because, some of us just want to see, 1 or 2 people a week and support people outside of our family and friends. And others hope we can hang a shingle up and do, a full-time right livelihood with this work. And I think especially for those on that end of the spectrum, these banks of the river, as it were, these foundational pieces really allow us to show up. And the final thing I think they create for me and a lot of my colleagues is the aspects of business and the structure they provide help prevent burnout, because we're able to establish where we're being supported and where we're not. And when we're just sort of willy-nilly flowing and we don't know what we're bringing in or what we're putting out or taxes or all those things. And I think that is where it's far easier for us to sort of evolve into burnout. So.
All right, dear listener. Well, it sounds like if Emily Ruff can do it, be super solid in her business practices, it sounds like you can too. That actually surprises me, Emily, that you said you might struggle with it, because you are very driven from my perspective, and you've done a lot of awesome, amazing projects. So also, I really liked your point about being crystal clear on your vision. Herb Rally would not exist if I didn't finally just say, fuck it, I need to actually have something to work towards, as opposed to just kind of floating around in space. And yeah, I finally set my goal on something, and I finally started working towards that. It sounds like you should do the same thing if you want to be a clinical herbalist. So I really appreciate you pointing that out. How do you think someone gets over the feeling that they don't know enough to actually practice as herbalists? And Kat, why don't we start with you?
So it's a process. It's obviously a journey. And I think the training is really important. It's a fine line. It's, so many people are like, well, everybody's an herbalist. If you work with plants, you're an herbalist. And if you're making teas, if you're teaching classes, you're an herbalist. And sometimes in some ways, I was just mentoring a woman yesterday, and there's this tremendous amount of pressure on people that have maybe done 2 years of online classes, never had a relationship, and, oh, I have to go practice now. And in asking her background, again, the fear is very appropriate. And is there really enough training? And I think it's very hard to, you would never get in a canoe and do a class 5 without having done 1 and 2 and 3 and practicing and tumbling. And so I really feel that to be a practicing herbalist, there has to be some form of clinical training, having, and whatever that can look like. That can look like an apprenticeship. It can be shadowing a midwife. I mean, my herbal teacher was a midwife because I didn't have one, and she was phenomenal. And introduced me to the Mennonite community and on and on. So, but I had to go watch. I wanted to really understand that. So as a clinician and as someone who has had clinical programs, there aren't many. And I don't really understand that. There's a few fabulous schools. The ones that are there are fabulous. I'm always beseeching herbalists, clinicians to begin those training because it's just so impactful when you're sitting with a person in a supported community. As a PA, I did rounds, I was on call, I did residency, I had tons of mentors, and I had tons of proctored time watching. And so that's what 20-year apprenticeships did. That's what Rosita did with Don Eligio. She watched him. She was in the clinic with him. And so that's a hard thing to get. But with the intention that Emily is saying, I know people have moved places to shadow and get that clinical experience. And I think there's a lot of allowance now of, oh, you're an herbalist, you don't need that. And it's frightening for the person. You want to take care of the person before they step in. So that was a bit rambly.
I followed.
Okay.
How about you, Patricia?
Well, I, I mean, I don't think there was ever a time that I sat down with a client that I felt completely like, I've got this. And I don't think that, I mean, when I take people out in the woods here in the Southern Appalachians, where we have all this botanical diversity in very, very concentrated, I always say, this is one of the most botanically diverse places in North America. And that's my disclaimer, because I can only hope that my herbs keep me alive long enough to learn as many plants here as possible, because it's so many plants. And I feel that way about practicing as an herbalist, because, we're always learning new things about how plants interact, what they do. There's always new understandings of how plants we thought we knew have qualities that we didn't. And so I think that it can make you a little anxious, because it's like, if I just didn't have to sleep, I could do everything I need to do and learn everything and do all the webinars. But at the same time, I think that like sitting with the I don't know is one of the ways you stay humble and you stay present, because when you really don't know exactly what's going to be called for in a consultation, you can be much more there. You can be much more attentive, because you realize that, they have the story, they have the narrative of how they got here, how they ended up in front of you. And your job is to just be a really good listener. And, I remember times when people would call me and say, I have MS and I want to come and talk to you. And I would look at every book I had on MS and try to understand what all the treatments were that were done in conventional medicine. And then Althea would say to me, are they sleeping? Are they digesting their food? Are they pooping? Are they happy? Do they move around when they can? Just take that MS diagnosis and put it over in the corner and look at the person and the quality of their life and stay with that. And I remember actually I took a seminar one time with Donnie Yance, and, he just, leaves everybody in the dust, and you're scrambling to catch up with what he's talking about. But at the end, he said, okay, all of this is important. And the most important thing is like, what's the quality of life for the person who you're dealing with? And focus on that, and don't get caught up in, the cellular mutations or all of that. And so, I've like tried to reassure myself every time I've had that feeling that a certain amount of that is what's needed, the doubt or the desire to know more than you do, but to not let that be something that keeps you from doing the work, to kind of embrace it as you're doing it. Because I don't know, I mean, all of us have been to like conventional medical doctors, and I'm not saying this as a blanket statement, but I've definitely had this experience of a level of arrogance and a lack of seeing me as an individual that is soul crushing when you're looking for help and you encounter someone who that's their approach. So I try to stay completely on the other end, and also just to be able to admit to clients, I really don't know what to suggest for that, but I know how I can find out. So that the goal is not to stay on top of it and be the know-it-all, but to be in partnership with them as we look for answers. So, yeah.
Love that. Humility, so important. How about you, Emily?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that word, Mason, humility, and that's what the plants reflect to us. That's maybe a controversial statement, but I don't believe that any of us will ever evolve to be master herbalists, although I think my two colleagues here are pretty close to that, and their teachers before them. But, I think that I'm always constantly rediscovering that even a plant that I know so well and have worked with so many clients will then surprise me by how a client's body is building relationship with it and reacting to it and working with it. And so I, shudder, no offense to any of your friends at those like online become a master herbalist in 6-week programs, because I feel like that's such a disservice to the craft and to the plants and to the people. who are both in that program as well as the potential people that they may be serving and potentially harming. But I also, at the same time, that I think, maybe we always have a little bit of that, hopefully we always have that healthy dose of humility, and that we're always approaching each client knowing that we're going to learn something about ourselves and the plants and the craft from each client that we see. At the same time, I think about, and I think you actually had an episode about this, Mason, with, I want to say it was David Hoffman saying, like, everyone needs nettle. Like, I tell my students a lot who have been through lots of supervised clinic with me, and they're sort of like, kind of ready for mentorship, but they're trying to, get their footing and develop that confidence. I think most everyone needs to drink more water. Most of us need to move a little more. Most of us could benefit from some rescue remedy. All of us need to find ways, especially in this day and age, to tap into our joy and our spirit and our, vibrancy of life. And so even if we're presented with a client who has from the medical system a really complicated list of comorbidities and diagnoses that we're not familiar with yet, we can learn about those things and study those things, like Patricia trolling through her books for MS. And at the same time, we can also send someone home with some rose for their heart, or some rescue remedy for their anxiety, or some water to keep themselves hydrated, and know that, like, then there's another step and another step from there. So I think the one thing we talk about a lot in our course that is, I think, a big piece of it is learning how to listen to the plants and listen to ourselves, and kind of, shake through all the rest of the noise that's coming at us about what we should be as an herbalist, or how we should feel in this practice, and just really be able to listen to our heart and the plants. Because if we're honest and approaching it with integrity, the plants are going to tell us when we've reached the edge of the scope of our own practice. And they're also going to tell us, hey, just send this person home with nettle, and next time you see them, you can, build upon that. So.
Mm-hmm.
I like that. Paul Bergner, about a decade ago, had a class called How to Be a Master Herbalist in 40 Years. And he just updated it to How to Be a Master Herbalist in 50 Years, which he's clearly being tongue in cheek there. So, I always love that. Also, you mentioned the David Hoffman video on Herb Rally's YouTube channel. So I just wanted to say, dear listener, if you wanted to check that out, that's basically where David Hoffman explains this quote, when in doubt, use nettles. So I just thought that was super fun, because you kind of hear that quote floated around the herbal community all the time. So it was fun to actually hear it from David himself. But we're kind of at a crossroads right now. It's 11:54, at least my time, which means we have 6 minutes. Do we want to go over and do some more questions, or do we want to start talking about the course and whatnot?
Yeah, we can tell you a little bit about what we're
It's your
cooking.
house. It's your call. But yeah, we can do the program. But one thing I did want to say about that with David Hoffman, because we've been quoting him forever, right?
Yeah.
But didn't he say he thinks it's so funny that everybody's quoting, because he was saying in relation to alteratives,
Yes.
When in doubt, use nettles.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was this huge, it's like finding something out about your parents or something that afterwards, because it's been ingrained in us, but in that relativity with the alternatives. And it's like, oh, right, nettles is an alternative. Yet one more aspect of this great plant. But yeah, questions, we can talk about the course. That'd be great.
Cool. Well, I had a question, Patricia. This was my own question. I actually did one on my own this time around. I'm curious what, first of all, I'm curious what the prerequisites are. Wow, that was a mouthful for some reason. Does any of you want to talk about the prerequisites for joining the mentorship? I guess I could point it at anybody. Emily, how about you?
Crafting Your Herbal Practice is this 9-month program, and we'll be meeting weekly. 6-month program. Sorry, 6-month program, September through March, and I meet weekly on Tuesdays. We have other stuff in between those weekly meetings, and I'm explaining this just to give a little context. The intention is that students entering the program have had a comprehensive course of study through a formal school, their own independent practice. We're not trying to legislate where that study comes from, but that they have a solid foundation and they're ready to support their communities, but they need that support, those banks of the river. And so prerequisites look like, an introductory or foundations program where they've developed a working knowledge of, like 100 plants and basics of anatomy and physiology and energetics and herbal actions. We hope students that apply will have a comprehensive A&P course or understanding, whether it's a college level course or something like Tammy Sweet's brilliant online course. And we want students to have begun to apply the health assessment paradigm that they're working with. So whether they really resonate with Ayurveda or humoral energetics or TCM or folk medicine. And then also are starting to understand things like the ethical and etiological issues that face our profession, at-risk herbs, and how we integrate and complement modern medicine and are not opposed, but also are filling gaps that modern medicine leaves. And so, just are starting to think critically about the role of an herbalist in a community in those contexts. So an introductory foundations level program that's established a really good working knowledge of plants and herbal actions and energetics, basic A&P, some college level or something like Tammy Sweets, and then folks that have begun to sort of apply their health assessment paradigm in a working application. And Kat or Patricia, anything else to add to that?
No, that was great. Thanks for taking that one.
Sorry, I realized that we're like an hour into the show and we haven't even said the website yet. So that's my bad as a shitty host here. I will be sure to include a custom intro, at least for the audio version. You can learn more about the course at yourherbalpractice.com. Again, that's yourherbalpractice.com. Links will be in the show notes as well as the YouTube video description. I was also curious about who are some of the guest teachers, or have you lined those up yet? Patricia, do you want to answer that or add on to what Emily said?
We've got a lot of people in the works. We're definitely going to be having Mimi Hernandez do some of the teaching as part of the program. She has done a lot of work over the years in coming up with resources for how to assess herbal research and online information. And she also really does a fantastic job with talking about herb-drug interactions and some of that information, which is its own little rabbit hole, to get down into that. So she's agreed. We have Jen Stovall, who has done a lot of work with harm reduction. She's going to be doing a class for us. So we have two ways guest teachers are going to be involved. We have those two doing actual live teaching as part of the Tuesday webinars, but we're also going to do some sort of Mason Hutchinson type podcast interviews of people who have different types of practices. And those will be videos that students just watch on their own. So, so far we have confirmations from Charles Garcia, who's a practitioner out on the West Coast, the Corandissimo tradition. I think I'm pronouncing that correctly. I think Lucretia Van Dyke is going to be one of our interviewees. Who else do you guys, I'm blanking at this moment. Who else?
Karen Dolan.
Oh yeah, Karen Dolan, who is at MUIH and is a nutritionist as well.
And Janet Kent.
Yeah. Janet Kent from Terra Silva, who's done a lot of work with using herbs to work with mental health issues, has agreed to be interviewed. So we're going to use those guest teachers. And we have a couple other people that we've approached who haven't confirmed. And what we're going to just do is ask them, like, how did you structure your practice? How did you decide to do this? What's the context? Where do you see clients? How do you do billing? Just some of that, just to kind of shine a little flashlight into the behind the scenes of people who are practicing and who have, done it for a while and have a lot to contribute, because we want people to, try on different practitioner outfits and see which one feels good to them. So that's going to be, I think, a really exciting part of the program is to have those people's voices integrated.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'd say between the additional 5 or 6 or 7 different guest teachers you'll have, that's like an additional, 100 years of experience. So you can update your website. Kat, do you want to add on to more talking about the Crafting Your Herbal Practice course?
Yeah, well, I love how it's being set up because, as we said, the first month will be really tending self. And what does that mean? And Emily has done a lot of work with her grief care and trauma. And so, each one of us is really sort of leading a month and a topic, but we're all present. We're all bringing our experiences to the table. But then we're also bringing lots and lots of resources. The format will be using a certain platform that Emily is very familiar with her Moon course. A lot of great places to park resources, to have confidentiality. So the first month is looking at self, looking at community, looking at justice issues that need to be taken into account with intakes. And that's another thing of, the guest teachers, we really want to show other possibilities. What are other realms? It wasn't until I met Lorna and then Emily with her grief care that I realized, Botanica Mobile Clinic. So watching other herbalists create and respond really planted seeds in my own practice. So that's what we also want to do. You don't have to have it in this format we make. Here's a spiritualist, here's, some other way, and this is how they make it work. And then the second month, I'll be doing more clinic intake, sacred space, the intake, soap notes, and then just offerings of possibilities of, how do you make your handouts? Because the herbalism, you're saying the same thing. You're repeating, you're always going back to the same thing. So let's create this whole set of handouts that you don't, because clients are overwhelmed by the compassion and the emotion, and they're just so taken by the experience. And then you're giving them instructions or recipes. And I love saying, look, just relax, sit back. This is all written down. Yeah. And so how do we help herbalists set that up? That they have their handouts, they have their protocols. Here's how to make an infusion. It's the whole thing. And I just love giving those clear instructions. And then Patricia will take the business aspects and how to tend all that, with that consciousness and the grace and the accounting and all of her years of experience. And then we take the month of December. We meet once in December, but we're going to take December off. And when we come back, there's more didactic, but then we get into the case study. And so this is that different lens and how to set that up. All the way through, they're observing each of us do an intake. And then we go into breakout sessions where they discuss, why did you ask this? How did you ask this? And then the next week, we discuss the protocol. They come up with a protocol, how to do that assessment and the different language to use. Mm-hmm. Everybody's different. I don't use the word formula. I use the word recipe. Anything is far away from medical, and I keep it food-based. That's just me, and that's just my way. And so we're all bringing in these, suggestions. Absolutely. Sharing forms, sharing apothecary forms, how to put down lot numbers, how to track the apothecary. There's so much more. And again, we're not specifying you need to have tissue state language. You need a certain lens. But for me in the clinic, the mantra is treat what you see, which is so relieving. It's like with Patricia's story, what is she looking at? She's not looking at MS. She's looking at this person, hearing this story, and how do you find your framework within that? So I know there's more. Do you each want to bring in? Setting up a vision plan, we help craft, what does this look like? That whole visioning process. You can call it a business plan, but, do you really want to have it in your home? What's it look like if it's in your home? You have to keep your house sort of tidy. It's so nice to leave home and, whatever it may be, go into the backyard, go to an office. Patricia?
Yeah. I just wanted to highlight, I really like that you brought up the different perspectives because, each one of you kind of brings your own expertise and you're teaching the different portions of the course, but also collectively are able to lean on each other. I wish I could have been there when y'all kind of were like scheming on this, like figuring out how this course was going to be created and stuff like that. I think that would have been a fun conversation to be a part of. But yeah, Emily or Patricia, did you want to add to that?
Well, I would just say it was many conversations, because I was just thinking about today, the first time that we talked, and I was driving in my car in Indiana, and we, I like logged into a call and we just started saying, we all have been thinking about this, and do we want to try to do something? So we've been meeting. The program already started for us, because we've been meeting once a week since last summer.
Wow.
To talk about how we want to set this up and all of that. But I think the other thing we're also going to be doing is dividing the group into smaller groups, and then each of the cohorts of 10 students will work with one of us very closely on a monthly basis, and that's where we'll be able to, hopefully overcome, some of the limitations of virtual learning, which is that, where we can interact with each other. And the platform we're using, I'm really excited about, because it does allow the students to interact with each other outside of class, which is so critical.
Emily, did you want to add anything, or?
Yeah, I think just kind of, piggybacking on what Patricia and Kat have said, just really, the framework of 6 months meeting weekly allows us to develop deeper relationships with each other, and also with the plants and with the practice, and really watch that evolve. And we'll be taking pauses throughout that 6 months to really sort of reflect and say, okay, how did I feel when I started? How do I feel now? Where do I hope to go? How do I feel now that we've sort of completed this? And really, include that in the framework of how we're growing, being able to pause and reflect and track our progress along the journey. And there's all sorts of tools and, practical aspects of it, but it's really, as Patricia and Kat both highlighted, really, we're meeting virtually so that folks from all over Turtle Island and wherever else beyond can join us, but also establishing a really engaging, connected community through that, so that we students can feel the support of the three of us, as well as learn from one another, and develop those really strong banks so that their river can flow really powerfully in service to the plants and to their community.
Yeah, I didn't know y'all were planning on, breaking up into groups of, say, 10 and whatnot. I think that's a really great idea. Again, dear listener, you can learn more at yourherbalpractice.com. I want to say it's the actual course is Crafting Your Herbal Practice. But yeah, when I first found out about this, I was like, wow, this is like a herbal dream team of sorts. So y'all are badasses, and I think you really complement each other very, very well. And great value. Please check them out, yourherbalpractice.com. I kind of want to end on one of the quotes that one of y'all wrote for the website, and I really liked it. It says, "Craft is a vehicle." Now, when you say craft is vehicle, I'm curious if that means crafting in your herbal practice, if you're referring to that. But craft is a vehicle for social change. As the world around and within us changes, so do we herbalists need to steward our craft. Do you all want to kind of speak on that? I kind of noticed it and really liked it.
Emily, would you? Because I think you're the one that actually came up with that language.
I was just thinking it was possibly Kat that did, but we also
it's a collaboration.
We spent lots of time, and I'll just say that, and then kind of turn it over to Kat. I think we've been in changing times for the 25 years that I've been practicing herbalism, but, in the last 3 years, it's undeniable that the changes in evolution are more rapid than ever before. And that is also reflected in the practice of herbalism, and more of us, seeing clients virtually, or, connecting to different ways to support our community. And so really thinking about the herbal practice as a craft, something that we hone, something that we polish, something that we refine, something that we nurture, and also something that nourishes us in return, so that we can conceive of our role as herbalists in this sort of ecosystem of our community as something that is really moving forward social change. We have so many crises economically, financially, socially, environmentally that our communities are facing. And herbalists, I believe, and I believe my colleagues believe this as well, are not just here to give you a plant instead of a pharmaceutical, but we're here to support the health of our communities so that our communities can address these changes in the most powerful and profound ways and bring forth justice for all beings on this planet, green and four-legged and winged and two-legged alike. So I'll step off my soapbox and turn it over to Kat.
Yeah, thank you. Well, when we were thinking about the name and, what's our intention? When you name, there's so many energies. You're bringing in, it's the invitation, and then it's also setting that intention in that seed, and we're planting a seed. And so we really wanted to honor that it is a time-tested tradition and that it does take a long amount of time to be a blacksmith, a basket maker, all of these incredible crafts. We really also want to honor the amount of time it takes to learn this craft. And I think so the word craft was in my mind. And so I was in DC at the Renwick Gallery, and the Renwick Gallery is this phenomenal museum devoted to craft. And so I went to this show that just was mind blowing, from ceramics to tapestries to art to, responding to recent political events, responding to the world. And, that was the first time that phrase craft for social change. And I watched I watched these artists respond, and that's us. Herbalists, we're responding to this social change. And it's the craft, whether we're planting the plants, preserving the plants, working with one or two herbs, not buying exotic herbs from around the world, but who's in our home. This is the time that this is social change. We have to be courageous to step away from those exotic plants we've come to know and love and find our maple trees, our dogwood berries. We have powerful, powerful plants. Mm-hmm. So, and we reinforce that all the way through. It's not just the preservation, but it's, the justice, as Emily so beautifully said, justice for all. But we're always editing everything. So I might have come in with that one, but then it's just so fun how I'm like, oh my God, they said it so well.
Awesome. Patricia, did you have any closing thoughts?
Yeah, just one last thing. And I say this to my students a lot, is like, herbalism is such a living thing. It's like, it's never fixed. It's always in motion. It's always fluid. And I encourage them to think about the fact that none of us would be here if there wasn't someone in our direct lineage who knew how to break a fever with herbs, or treat an infection, or stimulate labor in childbirth. And that our job is to take that legacy, that heritage, and to add our little contribution to it, and then pass it on. So, it doesn't end with us, and it doesn't start with us. We're just, moving it through to the next layer. And that to me, that kind of takes some of the pressure off to think that there's like, I remember actually just another David Hoffman quote, the first class I ever went to with him, because he was my first in-depth teacher at the California School of Herbal Studies. The first thing he did is write on the board, "Nothing I say is true." And we were all like, wait a minute, we just paid a lot of money and this guy saying, nothing he says is true. But then he explained, it's like, it's your truth. It's, Emily's truth. It's, what we learned through our relationship with the plants, how they come to our aid, that, we create a truth for ourselves. So that's, that's the blessing and the challenge, I think.
Love it. That's a great way to wrap up. And one more time, dear listener, check out yourherbalpractice.com. I want to say there's also a free webinar on there that y'all are giving away as well. That I want to say, what briefly, what does it cover, Emily? Is it just kind of similar stuff we talked about here today, or?
Yeah, we just offered it as a chance for folks to learn more about the course and the text that we have on the website. And we had some students participate in that, send us some questions. So it's right about an hour and just really focused on our intention with the course and the mechanics and logistics. And yeah, we invite you to sign up and check it out if you might be interested.
Awesome. Well, thanks you three for joining us on the Herbalist Hour, letting us know more about your course and just, yeah, all of your great, amazing teachings. So yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, we'll talk very soon. We'll get each one of you back on the Herbalist Hour as solo shows too. So
Great.
All right. Thanks, y'all. We'll see you very soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Hey everyone, this is Mason with Herb Rally. Thanks so much for watching today's video. If you liked it, please give it a thumbs up and also go ahead and subscribe. We come out with new herbal content each and every week. If you didn't know, Herb Rally also lists herbalism events. We list herbalism events chronologically. We list them also by state. So you can just go ahead and search by Oregon or Wisconsin or wherever you live. You can find out what herbalism events are happening in your neck of the woods. We also list herbalism events, virtual herbal events. So if you can't make it to an in-person conference or plant walk, we list lots of virtual events as well. To find out more, you could go to herbrally.com/events or herbrally.com/virtual. But if you can help it, I would highly recommend trying to go to an herbalism conference. Those are some of the best learning experiences I've ever had, and that's where you can find different herbal teachers, and then maybe you could perhaps take their apprenticeship. But yeah, just do what you can. Get out there and learn about the herbs, you know, like yarrow, dandelion, corn, you know, all the above, like all the medicinal herbs. And we'll see you out there. Hope to see you at an herb conference. All right, bye.